Ferrari just tested something in Monza that should not exist yet. Not next month, not later this season, not even under normal Formula One rules. And if what they tested is real, it solves the one problem that has been holding them back from winning. A power deficit of over 20 horsepower. Gone. But here's the part nobody is talking about. This wasn't a public upgrade. No announcement. No data. No explanation. Just a quiet run on the fastest track in Formula One. Which only makes sense if Ferrari already knows something the others don't. Because if this works, it doesn't just make them faster. It makes them impossible to copy in time. And what's coming next is exactly why teams inside the paddock are starting to get nervous. Ferrari doesn't have a slow car. That's the first thing you need to understand. Because if you look at the results, 3 races, 3 podiums, always fighting at the front, it feels like they're close. Very close, but not enough. And that difference, that tiny gap, is exactly where everything begins. Because the SF-26 is not failing everywhere. It's failing in one place. One very specific place. The straights. Full throttle. Maximum deployment. That's where the car loses everything it gains in the corners. And the numbers are brutal. Up to 30 horsepower down. Losing over 10 kilometers per hour on long straights. Every lap. Every race. And here's the problem. You cannot hide that. You cannot strategy your way out of that. You cannot drive around that. Because in Formula One, power is time. And time is everything. But here's where things get interesting. Because despite that weakness, Ferrari is still the second fastest team on the grid. Think about that for a second. Second best chassis. Elite tire management. One of the most stable cars in high-speed corners. Which means, if you remove the engine deficit, even partially, this car doesn't just improve. It transforms. And that's exactly what Ferrari realized. Not after months. Not after updates. After just 3 races. Because internally, the data was already clear. The issue wasn't balance. It wasn't aerodynamics. It wasn't setup. It was the engine. And more specifically, how the engine behaves over time. Because this is the detail most people missed. Ferrari's engine doesn't just lack peak power. It loses power as the race goes on. Slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, but enough to change everything. And once they saw that pattern, they stopped thinking about upgrades and started thinking about something much more radical. Something that doesn't fix the car. Something that replaces the limitation entirely. And that decision is what led directly to Monza. Because what Ferrari tested there was not designed to make them slightly faster. It was designed to remove the one thing that makes them beatable. But here's where the story takes a turn most people didn't see coming. Because Ferrari didn't arrive at this decision calmly. They were pushed into it. Race after race, the pattern kept repeating. Strong in Sector 1, competitive in Sector 2, and then they lose everything in Sector 3. Not because of mistakes, not because of strategy, because of pure engine limitation. In Suzuka, the data was crystal clear. More than 70% of their lap time loss came from the sections where power matters most. That's not a small issue. That's not something you adjust. That's a structural problem. And when a problem is structural, you don't patch it. You rebuild it. Now imagine being inside Ferrari at that moment. You have a car that can dominate corners. A car that protects tires better than almost anyone. A car that, in clean air, feels almost complete. But every time it reaches a straight, it becomes vulnerable, predictable, beatable. And that creates something even worse than being slow. It creates frustration, because the drivers feel it. Lap after lap. Leclerc knows exactly where he's losing time. Hamilton knows exactly what's missing. And when both drivers independently arrive at the same conclusion, that's when a team stops debating and starts acting. But this is where things escalate. Because Ferrari didn't just decide to improve the engine. They decided to question the entire philosophy behind it. The materials, the behavior under heat, the way performance changes over a race distance. Everything. And once you open that door, you're no longer developing, you're redesigning. And that's a dangerous path. Because it's expensive, it's risky, and under Formula One regulations, it's barely allowed. But Ferrari didn't hesitate, because they understood something critical. If they followed the normal upgrade path, they would stay second, maybe closer, maybe more competitive, but still second. And for Ferrari, that's not acceptable. So instead of chasing small gains, they went after the root of the problem, the hidden weakness inside the engine, the one that only appears after 10, 15, 20 laps. the one that slowly takes power away. And here's the key detail. This wasn't fully visible in testing. It only appeared in real race conditions, real temperatures, real pressure, real stress, which means every other team watching Ferrari was looking at incomplete information. They saw the deficit, but they didn't see the cause. And that's exactly why what happened next caught everyone off guard, because while others were optimizing setups, Ferrari was already working on something entirely different, something that wouldn't just close the gap, but change the way their performance behaves across an entire race. And when that kind of shift happens, it doesn't show immediately. It builds, quietly, until one moment where everything suddenly looks different. And that moment is exactly what Monza was hiding. And this is where Monza stops being just a track and starts becoming a signal. Because Ferrari didn't choose Monza by accident. They chose the one place on the calendar where weaknesses are exposed instantly. Long straights, maximum throttle, no room to hide. If your engine is down on power, Monza punishes you more than anywhere else. So testing there, before any official upgrade, sends a message. Either you are desperate or you are confident. And Ferrari right now is not acting desperate. They are acting calculated, because what they brought to that test wasn't a visible change. No obvious new wing, no dramatic aero concept, nothing that cameras could clearly capture, which means the real change was hidden, internal, mechanical, and that points directly to one thing: the engine, but not just more power, something far more important: consistency. Because the real issue Ferrari identified was not peak performance. It was what happens after 10 laps, after 15, after 20, when temperatures rise, when components expand, when efficiency drops. That's where they were losing races. Not at the start, not in qualifying, at the end. And if you fix that, you don't just get faster, you become dangerous. Because now your performance doesn't fade. It builds, lap after lap, stint after stint. And suddenly, the phase of a race where Ferrari used to defend becomes the phase where they attack. But here's the detail that changes everything. To achieve that, Ferrari couldn't rely on traditional solutions. They couldn't just tune the engine. They couldn't just improve cooling. They had to change how the engine behaves under stress, at a material level, at a structural level, which is why this isn't being treated internally as an upgrade. It's being treated as a new specification, a different identity. And that's exactly why the term SF-26B is starting to appear. Not officially, but consistently. Because when you combine a new engine behavior with a new aerodynamic package already in development, you're no longer evolving the same car. You are building a second version of it. One that corrects the original compromise. One that removes the original ceiling. And here's the part that should worry every other team. They can see Ferrari improving. They can measure lap times. They can analyze sectors. But they cannot copy what they don't fully understand. Because this isn't just about adding performance. It's about changing when the performance appears. Early, mid-race, late race. That distribution is almost impossible to replicate quickly. And by the time others understand it, Ferrari could already be operating at a completely different level. Which brings us back to Monza. Because that test was never about showing speed. It was about confirming behavior. Confirming that the power doesn't drop. Confirming that the performance holds. Confirming that the problem is actually gone. And if that confirmation is real, then everything Ferrari has shown so far this season was only part of the story. Because the version of Ferrari we've been watching might not even be their final form. And what's coming next is exactly why this quiet test could end up being the most important moment of their entire season. But here's the moment where everything connects. Because up to now, this looks like a brilliant recovery plan. Fix the engine, stabilize performance, unlock the car's true pace. Simple, logical, expected. But that's not what Ferrari is actually doing. They are going further, much further. Because internally, this is not being treated as a fix. It's being treated as a timing weapon. And that changes everything. Because Ferrari doesn't need to be the fastest today. They don't even need to be the fastest in Miami. What they need is to peak at the exact moment their rivals cannot respond. And that's why the entire development is being structured in layers. First, the aerodynamic package. Visible, measurable, something everyone can see, something everyone can try to copy. Then underneath that, the real change, the engine behavior, the consistency, the part that doesn't show up in photos. The part that doesn't reveal itself immediately. And when both layers come together, that's when the shift happens. Not gradually, not predictably, suddenly. Because think about how other teams react. They see Ferrari bring a new floor. They see changes in downforce. They adjust. They respond. They optimize. But they are reacting to the surface, not the core. And by the time they realize that Ferrari's straight-line weakness is no longer the same, it's already too late. Because engine development cannot be copied overnight, cannot be redesigned mid-season without consequences, cannot be accelerated without risk. And Ferrari knows that. That's why this isn't just engineering. It's strategy. Because they are not just closing a gap. They are choosing when that gap disappears. And if they time it correctly, they don't just catch up. They disrupt the entire competitive order. Now, here's the most important part. All of this only works if one condition is met. The new engine must be reliable. Not for one lap. Not for one session. For an entire race distance. Under pressure. Under heat. Under real conditions. Because if it fails, everything collapses. The plan, the timing, the momentum, all of it. And Ferrari is fully aware of that risk, which is why Monza mattered so much. Because that test was not about speed. It was about trust. Trust in the new behavior. Trust in the materials. Trust that when the car reaches lap 20, lap 30, lap 40, it will still deliver the same power, the same response, the same consistency. And if that trust is real, then Ferrari has done something very few teams ever managed to do mid-season. They didn't just improve the car. They changed its trajectory. They changed when it becomes strongest. And that leads to one final question. One that nobody inside the paddock is answering yet. Because if Ferrari's peak is still ahead, and everyone else has already shown their hand, then when that moment finally arrives, will it look like an upgrade? Or will it look like a completely different team?